Nice of you to drop in, friends. Here is another episode of the top 10 favorite and from what I believe are the best performances by some of the greatest actresses in all of cinema. Now listen here, you tough cookies. I am starting from 10 and then fighting and crooning my way up to number 1. Well, not really fighting, but keep in mind, my friends, I have seen every film that is attainable of these artists, so every list comes from truthful and mesmerizing accuracy, I can assure you. That's right, guys, it is Women's Appreciation and History Month, which should be carried on every single month, right? But I hope you're ready for today's episode as we have to talk about one of the most inspirational, dedicated, and pioneering female artists in all of television and, most importantly, of cinema. The incomparable Ida Lupino. Born in London from an already prominent performing family, Connie Emerald and Stanley Lupino, how could she have not pursued the performing arts? She never felt naturally forced because it just came naturally being raised around song and dance and comedy and tragedy. However, she would state years later that the only kind of pleasing she felt she received from her family was only around the arts. And I, for one, I completely understand that. She made it to Hollywood pretty fast, signing on with Paramount, and after her many bit roles as a blonde floozy in the beginning of her career, she was dubbed the English Jean Harlow, which didn't sit really well with her. So she switched studios, hopped on over to Warner Brothers, changed her hair back to her natural brunette, and it wouldn't be long until she gained the respect she deserved as a growing and dedicated artist. But then again, guys, I feel Ida Lupino has never really got her due. Let's be upfront and clear, my friends. Ida Lupino is one of the most underrated, influential, inspirational, and dynamic female artists in the history of cinema. She was able to captivate you from her very first appearance, not just because of her beauty, but because she was a woman who meant serious business. Lee Grant, another underrated and phenomenal female artist, stated it beautifully that Ida always played characters that never really used their looks in getting what they wanted. They used their cunning minds and intelligence to get ahead. And honestly, that equals itself to Ida's own life as a filmmaker. Not only was she an incredible actress, but grew into an incredibly aspiring writer, producer, and director at a time when female directors was practically non-existent. In 1942, she refused to star alongside Ronald Reagan in King's Row, so she was put on suspension, and it was around this time she decided to follow through with her hunger as an artist. She partnered with her producer husband at the time, Collier Young, and formed their own production company, The Filmmakers Incorporated, focusing on films that were controversial and socially conscious. She gave opportunities to up-and-coming young artists and strove to make films that depicted realism in a way no one has ever really experienced it before. Later on within this video, folks, I will rank Ida Lupino's 7 directorial efforts because this certainly wouldn't be a video about Ida Lupino without talking about her groundbreaking films. According to IMDb, Ida has 42 directing credits to her name, majority of that being television, of course, and some of her episodes on some of the most famous TV shows at the time were usually the most entertaining and thrilling. For instance, I would be a damn fool not to mention her powerful effort on one of my favorite TV shows of all time, The Twilight Zone, directing in its 5th season, the episode entitled The Masks. You know, the one with all the family relatives having to wear masks on Mardi Gras for their dying patriarch until midnight. God, that episode is so fantastic. It clearly is one of the greatest episodes in the entirety of the series, and being the only episode of the original series to be directed by a woman, Miss Lupino herself. Speaking of Twilight Zone again, how about her breathtaking performance as Barbara Jean Trenton in another amazing episode entitled The 16mm Shrine, which is basically a Twilight Zone take of Sunset Boulevard, which Ida should have received an Emmy for. God, she was magnificent, because it's a tribute to her as much as a mirror to the tragic decline she experienced as an artist. Television was a big savior for her career for a long time, not just in directing, but of course, as an actress. I mean, who can forget her cute sitcom, Mr. Adams and Eve, co-starring her destructive husband, Howard Duff, and funny enough, produced and created by her ex-husband, Collier Young. Awkward! For her 2 seasons of work on Mr. Adams and Eve, she was nominated twice for the Emmy for Best Actress. And after watching the show myself, I mean, it's clear to see why. She was a storyteller of the best kind. Ladies and gentlemen, I say this every time, but this time I mean it. Now more than ever, this was one of the most difficult lists and rankings I've ever done. Ida Lupino literally has so many beautiful performances. It gives me an ulcer to just limit it down to 10. And yes, I am a bit of a rebel, but I like to follow my own rules, guys. Without a doubt, I can do a top 20 of this queen, but once again, if I broke my own rules, I don't want Ida to slap me. Silly boy. So let's not waste any time, my friends. Here are the top 10 best performances of one of the greatest and underrated female artists ever, Ida Lupino. Starting off at number 10, we have Roadhouse. And I know what you're thinking. And nope, you won't find the amazing Patrick Swayze in this one, which, that's such a fun time. Come on, admit it. You know you like it too, guys. But yes, the classic film noir starring Lupino herself as Lily Stevens, a hot and sultry torch singer who's starting to get the hots for a new manager played by Cornell Wilde. But will a jealous Richard Widmark be able to stop them? Ooh. I tell you, folks, I love a great film noir, and sure, you can count this film as a melodramatic film noir-esque, because it's still a theme about identity and looking for a change in this cruel, harsh world. And who better than Ida to inhabit that inside and out? She was only 30 years old here, and already had such a mature spirit about her that she's had ever since she was practically a kid. You can't go wrong with Ida doing her own singing here as well, unlike some of her previous films. And she's pretty good, isn't she? If you like the sound of gravel, says Susie. Her singing works really well because it helps us understand how jaded and yet tough she is. So tough that she won't give in easily. Oh, come on, baby, I ain't trying to push ya. Swat. Slap. Silly boy. God, I just love that so much. Number 9, Moontide. Yeah, I'm going to say this over and over again. This should absolutely be much, much higher to me. And it should because Ida's performance as Anna, which won the National Board of Review Award, is one heartbreaking and heartwarming performance to always remember in film noir. Based on the novel by Willard Johnson, we have Bobo, which, I'm sorry folks, I just can't stand that that's his name. I understand why, but it's still a clown's name to me. Anyway, Bobo is played by Jean Gabin, who was going to have Fritz Lang direct this, but jealousy on the three-way affair demolished that between the men and Marlene Dietrich. So Archie Mayo handles it with so many foggy and shadowy and lovely images that whispered danger. Ida's role was originally going to be played by Joan Bennett, but her pregnancy opened the door for Ida to step in and give such a fantastically thrilling performance, which was really significant considering the fact that pretty much a lot of her backstory was trimmed away from the script. So Ida literally is left to ground her character and let us into her world, which she does splendidly. Every scene between she and Thomas Mitchell is dynamite, right in your face. Ida completely understood the power of cinema because she could say so much by saying little to nothing. It's the theater training, I'm telling you, folks. Number 8, Junior Bonner, a heartfelt film directed by the daredevil cowboy himself, Sam Peckinpah, which, fun fact, at one point was as broke as a joke and living in a shack behind Ida Lupino back in the 50s. Ida noticed this and hired Sam to work on her show, Mr. Adams and Eve. And it's amazing how almost 20 years later, he would help Ida with giving her the prominent role of Elvira Bonner. the mother of Junior, played by Mr. Steve McQueen. Almost autobiographically, Junior's on the wrong side of 40, but not even the wrong side. It's just his side, returning to his hometown in Prescott, expressing his wild and runaway lifestyle through rodeo, while the family comes to terms with each other. The film is quite nice for Peckinpah, and the whole ensemble is really at their absolute best, but the chemistry between Robert Preston and Ida Lupino just sizzles. Here we see two classic film stars in the new wave of filmmaking and the West, and Ida Lupino was not exactly the top star on every producer's list at that time, not even in directing, sadly. So once Sam gave her this opportunity, she was more than happy to play opposite Steve and Robert Preston. The scenes where Preston is trying to lure her to go to Australia are just as captivating. It's truly one of Ida Lupino's most honest performances, because there's nothing put on here. There's nothing showy. It's just living in the moment. Dare I say how cliche that is for actors out there, but there's nothing like seeing an actor on screen that truly lives out their character. Number 7, Ladies in Retirement. Quite an interesting film adaptation of the popular and classic Broadway play of the same name, starring Ida Lupino as Ellen Creed, who is a caretaker and companion for Leonora Fisk, played brilliantly by Isobel Elsom, reprising the role she originated on Broadway. Ellen cares so dearly for her sisters, played by Elsa Lanchester and Edith Barrett, so much that she convinces Mrs. Fisk to let the sisters stay with her to avoid being institutionalized. However, Miss Fisk doesn't seem to be as helpful as Ellen wanted, so something's gotta change. I tell you folks, I quite enjoy this film, and Lupino gives such a caring and hypnotic performance as Ellen, despite the fact that her character is originally written to be in her 60s. The producers were fighting tooth and nail against having Lupino play Ellen, but director Charles Vidor loved her so much, he and the makeup team did everything they could to make her look much older than her humble age of 23 at the time. Honestly, I think it works really well, and it also creates this extra mystery between the relationship with the sisters as well as Miss Fisk, whom she builds amazing chemistry with, as well as with her cousin, Albert, played by Ida's husband at the time, Lewis Hayward, who unexpectedly comes to town. The way Lupino goes through the steps of hysteria in this film is wildly captivating that I believe it should be recognized even more. Even Lupino herself, who was never an artist that critiqued herself on her acting work, felt the performance worth remembering that was quote-unquote halfway decent was her Ellen Creed here. Number 6, On Dangerous Ground. Once again, this should be much, much higher, I know, because this mystic, romantic, winnery film noir from the underrated director Nicholas Ray is one gem to be seen. Loosely based on the novel Mad with Much Heart by Gerald Butler, not Gerard Butler. No, Robert Ryan, one of my favorite actors and people ever, plays Jim Wilson, a tough cop who's had it with the beat. And after abusing too many punks on the job, he's then sent upstate to solve a murder of a child. But then he meets Mary Walden, an independent woman who happens to be blind, played by Lupino. Wilson starts to grow attachment to Mary, but comes to find out that she's the sister of the suspected murderer. Once again, this is quite an underrated, unconventional film noir. Unconventional because some critics find the next chapter of Wilson going upstate slowing the pace down and the snowy Colorado environment distracting. I personally think it's wonderful. It gives us another shape of a story for our hero to change. Not to mention Nicholas Ray's wonderful direction. He's always been an amazing actor's director. And thanks to Bernard Herrmann's always enchanting and tense score that heightens this film. But it's Ida Lupino's beautiful performance as Mary. It is so spellbinding every time I see it. It's not always easy to play a person with the disability of being blind, obviously. But Ida does it in such a way that genuinely breaks your heart. She gives such dignity to the role of Mary that we wish all the love in the world for both Wilson and Mary to get together. But she also doesn't play the victim. It's a very nuanced performance that deserves more recognition for sure. Number 5, The Light That Failed. Based on the Rudyard Kipling classic, this film was Ida Lupino's true breakout performance that really showcased her as a versatile actress to be reckoned with. In contrast, like what Of Human Bondage was for Bette Davis, The Light That Failed was for Ida Lupino. And yes, since Ida Lupino was always referred to as the poor man's Bette Davis, because apparently every role that Bette Davis turned down, she got. This worked out well, didn't it? Ida Lupino lobbied hard for her role as Bessie, a broken down Cockney, shall we say, lady of the night, who is brought in to service Dick, but only to serve as a model for Dick's paintings. That sounds better, right? Anyway, she's turned on by the money, but she grows hateful against Dick and more affectionately towards Torp, played by an underused Walter Houston. Hate is building more and more at Dick that Bessie will do anything to sabotage him. If only she knew Dick was slowly going blind. This film is so great, with all the great powers behind this film, including Wild Bill Wellman behind the camera, Ronald Colman, of course, but Ida Lupino is without a doubt the true standout star here. At a time when she was mostly known as the blonde Bimbette in her previous films, she shook the screen up in her fierce portrayal of a damaged woman who's only on the further decline of constantly holding her body rock solid for Dick. I'm sure you all remember her iconic sequence when Dick wants her to laugh her head off in the pose, when she can't do it anymore. But after enough forcing, she tilts her head back, laughs her head off, and at the same time, we see she's screaming in agony. Oh God, it's so visceral and painful at the same time. It's a brutally honest and gripping performance that once again, I sound like a broken record, it should be much higher. Number 4, High Sierra. Another hell of a classic film noir, directed by the legendary Raoul Walsh, that stands the test of time, technically giving Ida Lupino first billing for the first time in her whole career in 1941, and being 22 years old at the time. Legend has it that Bogart and Lupino didn't get along while filming because of the fact that Lupino got top billing and Bogey was second fiddle, even though he was clearly the lead. The producers did this because they looked at Bogey as a B-movie actor at the time and didn't want to risk any profit loss if the public didn't connect with him, even though he had his breakout role with The Petrified Forest earlier. But in all truth, they adored each other and loved working together. Sure, it wasn't always fun, but Ida has said herself she respected Bogey, and Ida truly, oh my God, she truly brings her A-game to her performance as Marie, a former taxi cabbie who helps with the robbery done by her boyfriend Babe, Red Mendoza, and of course, Roy Earl, played by Bogey. When the robbery goes horribly wrong, it's Roy and Marie with his new adopted dog, Pard, which of course was Bogey's own dog, Zero. Adorable. Their chemistry together is just off the charts. And of course, by the time we get to the beautiful ending sequence on Mount Whitney, oh, we are heartbroken. And it's Lupino's tragic movement. Even though she had trouble crying on camera, apparently, gosh, she sold it. Sold it with such grace. After the cop goes, "Grash is out? That means he's free." Free? Free. And she walks off with Pard. It's soothingly moving. Number 3, The Sea Wolf. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one effing incredible film. Adapted from Jack London's classic novel, which there have been many adaptations, but none come close to this mesmerizing piece of work. Directed by the great master himself, Michael Curtiz, with Ida Lupino seriously one of the greatest performances ever, which is obviously not in the original novel. Her character was written in by Ida's influence by Robert Rossen, the brilliant screenwriter and director. I just love how we're introduced to Ruth Webster, played by Lupino, as she is clearly a runaway and hiding, frantically asking the writer, Humphrey, played wonderfully by Alexander Knox, to cover for her. And then off they go on a ferry that sinks, but rescued by the mythic and surreal ship, the Ghost, helmed by Captain Wolf Larson, played brilliantly by Edward G. Robinson. Rescue soon turns into imprisonment pretty fast, as they are ordered to abandon their objectives and work for Larson, as well as challenge the self-educated and Nietzschean philosophy of the captain. Hopefully, with the help of crew member Leach, played amazingly by John Garfield, Ruth and Humphrey will be able to escape, but not without a little romance in there, which again was influenced by Ida. Does the romance distract the pace of the film? I don't think so. I mean, it's not really necessary in my humble opinion. However, I don't mind it at all. And at the same time, it's definitely an aspect audiences would be more attracted to balance out all the thrilling drama in this film. Ida and John Garfield, man, they work exquisitely together because John really was a giving actor and so was Ida. So the connection just worked fiercely on screen. Ida has so many moving moments as a woman who, again, notably, is trying to run away from her past and begin anew. I just love the scene she has with Garfield and wishing to be free. That's all she wants, is to be free. Number 2, They Drive by Night. Need I say it? Yes. This is most likely number 1 for most, and it's pretty neck and neck, my friends, because her performance as Lana Carlson is indeed, again, one of the greatest and iconic femme fatale roles in all of film. This was also the first performance I ever saw of her as a kid, thanks to the magic of TCM. Based on the book The Long Haul, and actually the Paul Muni and Bette Davis film Bordertown, it features George Raft and Bogey as the Fabrini brothers, both owning an independent trucking business, and one night after meeting a new server played by Ann Sheridan, they witness an accidental death on the road, and then leads them back home, where a former driver, Ed, comes back in their lives, including Ed's wife, Lana, played by Lupino. She's got the hots for George Raft, see? But he's absolutely building a good thing with Ann Sheridan, and wants to marry her, and no dame's gonna come in my way. Well, I certainly can't spoil it for you folks, but I'm sure most of you know the iconic lines from this film, which I'll admit the script is not the most pure in the action of the real drama, especially when you compare it to today, of course. These were the times, guys. But when we see Ida fight for what she demands and what she feels she's entitled to with, I committed murder to get you. You understand? Murder. And of course, the interrogation room where she is freaking out and dragged back to the cell. Stop it. Stop it. It's chilling and crazy. And the testimony in court. Yes, the doors made me do it. The doors made me do it. I remember that truly freaking me the hell out when I was a kid. But let me tell you something. Her performance is the greatest standout in this uneven yet iconic film noir classic, which kept her for a long while. One of the most popular and impactful actresses. Okay, my friends, here are some honorable mentions of her film performances. Pillow to Post. Yeah, we could be honest again, folks, it's not the best, but hey, come on, it's really a fun time. It's probably Ida Lupino's most effective film comedy she starred in, based on the play Pillar to Post, where she's a daughter of an oil supply company owner, and she convinces her father to be a traveling sales lady during World War II. But in order to get a good home during the housing shortage, she needs an army lieutenant to pose as her husband, leading to massive sitcom-like misunderstandings. Ida Lupino certainly makes this film such a delight, especially with her showcase of comedic timing. Out of the Fog, one effective film noir pairing Lupino again with John Garfield and Thomas Mitchell, and with the amazing writer Robert Rossen. Adapting it from the play, The Gentle People, we have John Garfield as such a heavy, playing racketeer Harold Goff, who extorts money from these people in Brooklyn, with the daughter of one of them, Lupino, agreeing to date him so that she can live a better life and leave town. This is certainly one of those films that works graciously, thanks to the amazing performances of Garfield and Lupino. They have so much to play within their characters that is really dark and three-dimensional. The Man I Love, A fan favorite of Ida Lupino's for sure, with Ida Lupino as a sexy lounge singer who goes back home to see her sisters and gets a job at a nightclub owned by a small-time mob. Shocking. She then falls in love with sax player Bruce Bennett, who's got his own marital problems to deal with. Of course, Ida is the best damn reason to see this film, guys, which may feel a little too much like Roadhouse, but here we have such a sultry strength from Lupino, even though her singing is dubbed by Peg LaCentra. Beautiful voice, but we want Ida's voice, man. The Big Knife, which is a fun film adaptation of Clifford Odets' brilliant play about the corrupt Hollywood, even though some of the best lines from the play were cut from the movie. Directed by Robert Aldridge, with an all-star cast, including Jack Palance as Charles Castle, a successful movie star who is forced by the studios to continue his contract while they blackmail him on a hit-and-run he committed. All the while, his wife Marion, played majestically by Lupino, wants out of her marriage, being sick of Charles' drunken womanizing. Again, Ida's performance to me is the bright shining star in this uneven film adaptation. Even though the whole ensemble is great, Palance, Rod Steiger, good God, Shelley Winters, they're all great, but I love Ida's spicy spunk, and yet motherly and generous performance as Marion. Devotion, a film about the famous Bronte sisters, yes, Charlotte and Emily, like no other. A film that's so beautiful, so passionately enthralling. You really wish it was a true story. Yes, this is very much a fictionalized story of the sisters, no doubt, played elegantly and so truthfully by Olivia de Havilland as Charlotte and Ida Lupino as Emily. Olivia's star sister Joan Fontaine was eyed to play Emily, but after agreements couldn't be reached, Ida was next in line. And if you ask me, it's perfect casting. Ida and Olivia work off each other so wonderfully here that you would want them to work together more and more, even though, yes, the writing and film itself is a bit too cheesy for its own good, making the sisters looking like they're the March sisters from Little Women. I think it's quite clear that the brooding classics, Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, are not thematically really the same as Little Women. The film famously was filmed in 1942 to 1943, but its premiere was delayed for technically 3 years because of Olivia de Havilland's lawsuit, which I'll cover in another video. Stay tuned. But Ida Lupino, she gives all she can to this performance. So many genuine moments that just steal your heart, like her breakdown moment with Arthur Kennedy in the rain. It just makes your heart shake to pieces. Number 1. Yes, my friends, as hard as it was, the hard way. I think it should be known, her performance as Helen Chernin is a prime example of an actor making an ill-written movie supremely epic and dazzling because of how much she gives to this film. It's also one of those great, somewhat soul-leading roles Ida Lupino ever really had, and she dominates it in every single scene. She plays Helen, an ambitious sister of Katie, played by Joan Leslie, who wants nothing more than to get out of their small mining town. Sound familiar to any of her previous works? Katie is a beautiful singer, so she pushes Katie into marriage with a famous singer/dancer, Albert, played surprisingly well by Jack Carson. Helen manipulates and controls the temperature of every room she walks into, and every step of their journey to stardom, and she vows to do whatever she can to keep them climbing to the top, even if it involves stealing Katie's true love for herself. I know, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of you might be throwing your hands up over this film being number 1 because of, again, maybe how dull and maybe not that engaging it is. Ida Lupino herself broke down during production one day and said this movie basically is going to suck, and she's going to suck in it. So Ida Lupino made sure to give this film all she got no matter what, and she makes this film so worthwhile and one hell of a memorable leading performance. Her role was originally turned down again by her great contemporary, Bette Davis, But honest to God, her performance here is much, much more than that. Everyone loves Ida Lupino's performance in this film, which awarded her the New York Film Critics Award for Best Actress of the Year. This was also famously based on the relationship between the great Ginger Rogers and her mother, Leela Rogers, who was quite overbearing and more. The climactic fight between she and Joan, when Ida stands strong and nasty and she says, "How else can you get along? By being soft, honest? No, you've got to fight. You've got to scheme and double-cross to get ahead in this business." Spoken like a true stage mom. Just kidding, but what's moving is that Helen really is soft herself. She plays tough, easily to get further. But she herself wants a true love too. She wants a life filled with luxury and peace, and knowing that she did something masterful within her life. And doesn't that just speak volumes about the artist herself? She was extremely tough inside and out, Ida Lupino, but at the same time, she wanted a peaceful and rewarding life, and though her marriages never worked out, especially her final marriage to Howard Duff, who was the ultimate destroyer of her life, honestly, with all of his gambling, womanizing, etc., she did everything she could to stand strong on her own 2 feet and create amazing work, just like her monumental films she produced, co-wrote, and directed. Now we come to the point of ranking the 7 films she made, which for me are Hard, Fast, and Beautiful, which was technically her 4th directorial effort, about an up-and-coming young tennis star who has an overbearing stage mom, played well by Claire Trevor. She is forced to become the best, but has trouble deciding between true love or success. The tennis sequences are thrillingly shot. And hey, there's Ida and Robert Ryan doing a little Hitchhiker cameo. That's fun. Not Wanted, which is a wonderfully haunting film. Keep in mind, guys, just because these are ranked within the 7 does not mean I don't like any of these films. I actually really love and admire every single one of these films. And here, Ida Lupino took over directing for Elmer Clifton, who suffered a heart attack and couldn't finish filming. She took over, on top of producing and co-writing, and turn in a documentary-like masterpiece of low-budget expressionism, showing the theme of out-of-wedlock pregnancy and the aftermath of what unwanted pregnancy could do for an average young woman. I didn't give herself a screen credit for directing out of respect for Elmer, which also shows the humility she possessed as an artist. The Bigamist, a wildly groundbreaking film again about a husband and wife played by Edmond O'Brien and Joan Fontaine, who, side note, was then married to Ida Lupino's ex-husband Collier Young, co-producer and writer of this film. Are you all keeping track? Anyway, they're trying to adopt a baby until Edmund Gwynn, the adoption agent, finds out Edmund O'Brien already has a baby he's taking care of from another affair he had with a woman played by Ida herself, in her only film where she directed herself, which at that time was still taboo. The film definitely opened more doors for more auteurs and is featured as one of the 1001 movies you must see before you die. Honestly, I would say that for every one of her films. Never Fear, or otherwise marketed as The Young Lovers, Ida's first credited directorial effort about a young performer diagnosed with polio and the effects of potentially losing her dreams, including the love of her life. Having been released in 1949, this was huge, gaining the attention of Eleanor Roosevelt, where Ida marketed the film on a radio broadcast with the former First Lady. Co-written again by Ida, this was a challenging autobiographical tale taking from Ida's own diagnosis of polio at 16 years old, but was saved due to the serum she was given. The film wasn't as profitable for the filmmakers, but once again, the documentary-like aura this film has, incorporating actual patients with polio, gives this film such a heartfelt look at patients doing their best to enjoy life. Outrage, another haunting film about rape and the effects it has on the victim, knowing she can't really talk about it. She's not fairly treated for the traumatic experience she's gone through either. So she resorts to run away and start a new life, resulting in devastating as well as uplifting events. You want to talk about taboo subjects? This was one for the ages at its time of release in 1950. The whole silent sequence between Mala Powers and the rapist, whom we never know his name, he becomes a ghost practically, is just spine-tingling. The moments where she's banging on the walls, on the windows, begging, pleading, crying out for someone to help her it's earth-shattering. It's unbelievably shocking, so tragic. It's utterly quiet and horrifying. Ida really captures the horror of rape without ever showing it. It's meticulously, brilliantly directed on her part. The film was rightfully entered into the National Film Registry in 2020, being culturally and historically significant. The Trouble with Angels. Whew, a little funfair indeed, starring Rosalind Russell as Mother Superior and Haley Mills and June Harding as new Catholic schoolgirls at St. Francis Academy as they rebel their way all through school with harmless pranks, but over time start to mature and grow their own ambitions and understanding. This film is very dear to countless many, including my own mother. I can remember the constant times my mom would have this on in the background while I did my homework, and it just touched my heart every time. It's utterly fantastic and endearing comedy, and there are so many great moments from our amazing leads, June and Haley and Rosalind, that it just becomes, as well as the sisters. They are so hilarious. It is so much fun to watch. And now, my favorite and what I believe is Ida's best film she's ever directed, The Hitchhiker. I mean, come on, folks. We're talking about one of the greatest film noirs with an all-male cast, directed by a woman. Based on the Billy Cook murder spree, it's the simple story of two best friends going fishing towards Mexico, and through the goodness of their heart, pick up a hitchhiker, played brilliantly by William Tallman, and the eye that wouldn't close. His reveal with the gun is one of the greatest close-up reveals in cinema, where he demands, "Keep driving." So tense. Tallman had once said the best feedback and best award he ever got for his performance in this film was when he went out driving one day, and then at a stoplight, someone came up and asked, "Are you the hitchhiker?" And he said, "Yeah." And the guy just punched him right in the face. Great compliment, because he is one evil son of a bitch in this movie. Ida went all the way with this film, interviewing the murderer himself, Billy Cook, for this film, and giving it such a gritty, darkened edge. As many critics recall, it is directed with such masculine strength by Ida Lupino. The film was rightfully so entered into the National Film Registry in 1998 and remains one of the greatest film noirs of all time. Side note, I also love how every character in Mexico in this film is actually Mexican and they all speak Spanish. Very different at the time, obviously. Nothing makes me happier than authenticity, especially when it involves a regional setting. And that's what makes Ida one of the greatest queens of cinema. Not only bringing every character to life, no matter how nasty or villainous they were, but bringing authenticity, realism, and heart to the roles, whether she was playing the roles herself, or writing the roles, or directing them. She became the second woman ever to join the Directors Guild of America after Dorothy Arzner, another pioneering female director. What's fascinating is that Ida said she wasn't really a feminist, even though every action she did led such an example and opened doors for future female filmmakers to come. But she said keeping a feminine approach is vital. Men hate bossy females, says Ida, which is why she always had everyone on set call her mother. The different and beautifully maternal approach for men, because men at this point weren't going to disagree and fight with their mother, and that's pretty much why most of her film sets never encountered any clashing egos. This has to be known, folks. If it weren't for her example, stepping out and building her own production company, becoming such an accomplished filmmaker, I believe we would not have the great female filmmakers like Catherine Bigelow, Chloe Zhao, Barbara Streisand, Lena Wertmuller, Jane Campion, Cassie Lemons, Greta Gerwig, Sarah Polley, and so on and so on. The most painful thing of it all is that she was never honored with an Academy Award. But at the end of the day, she didn't really care about that. She only really cared about telling vital and important stories in cinema. Like her own production company, the Filmmakers Incorporated, she inhabited that with every inch within her body. She has had her fair share of controversy, but I just love her own mindset that's as positively strong. And I quote the woman herself, "I'm mad, they say. I'm temperamental, dizzy, and disagreeable. Well, let them talk. I can take it. Only one person can hurt me. Her name is Ida Lupino." And cut. Checking the gate. And now, my friends, could you please share your favorite performances and films of this monumental inspiration named Ida Lupino? The comment section is waiting for you, my friends. And if you like this, I dare say, please click like, high five. And if you could please subscribe, that'd be awesome. Don't forget to ring that bell to stay updated on more content to come. I've heard your requests, and I am working on them just for you. Until next time, my friends, thank you so very much for watching, and thank you all who have subscribed, and thank you for helping keeping the classics alive.